I remember the moment like it was yesterday. The way my brother looked at me across the dinner table, his eyes full of something. I couldn't quite place it. It was like he was ready to say something, but it wasn't just any normal conversation. You could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. The rest of the family was scattered around the table, laughing and chatting, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. But then, he opened his mouth. "You're useless," he said, almost casually, as if he had been holding that thought in for far too long. It wasn't the words themselves that hit me, it was the delivery. It was the coldness in his voice, the way he said it like it was a simple fact, like he had every right to say it in front of everyone. The room fell silent for a split second. I'm sure they could feel it, too, the shift. The uncomfortable air between us. But I didn't respond. I let him finish talking. He went on about how I'd never been good enough, how I had let everyone down, how I was always the one who didn't pull his weight. I kept my head down, pretending to pay attention to my food, but inside, I could feel the anger bubbling up. Not at him, not at what he was saying, but at myself. How had I ended up here? The truth is, I had always tried to be the responsible one, the one who kept it together. I never asked for praise, never needed validation. But this was different. This was public. This was him attacking my pride in front of the people I cared about most. Why did he feel the need to do this now, after everything we had been through? It wasn't like he didn't know the sacrifices I'd made. It wasn't like he didn't see the effort. But there he was, throwing it all away with a single sentence. And yet, I didn't fight back. Why? I kept quiet. I kept calm. I knew that if I said something now, it would escalate. It would be messy, and it wasn't the right time. But something in the back of my mind told me this wasn't just about me. Something was off. This wasn't the first time I had felt this way around him. But tonight, it felt different. I could feel the anger rising in him, and I wondered if it had been building up for a while. The question was, why didn't I see it coming? Why didn't I confront him sooner? Was he right? Was I really the problem, or was he just looking for someone to blame? The tension in the air didn't die down. It lingered. It settled into the room, and for the rest of the evening, everything felt wrong. But as much as I hated it, I let it be. I didn't respond. I let him finish. I don't know if it was the right choice, but I couldn't bring myself to lash out. Not yet. I had to wait. I had to understand the full picture. I had to understand why he felt this way before I made my move. Because if I didn't, I knew it would only get worse. But how much worse could it get? That's the question I kept asking myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. After my brother's words hung in the air, I did my best to just play it cool. Everyone else went back to talking, and the conversation drifted. But I couldn't let it go. How could I? He had said it so casually, like it didn't even matter. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment to tear me down in front of everyone. But why? Why now? We had always had our differences, sure. But it wasn't like this. It was like he had been waiting for the perfect time to show just how little he thought of me. I watched as the evening carried on, but I couldn't help but observe the interactions. My mom, sitting across from me, was talking to my cousin Sarah about her latest gardening project. My dad was halfway through a glass of wine, talking about his work, completely oblivious to the subtle tension that had taken root in the room. But there was something about the way my brother, Mark, was looking at me that caught my attention. It was like he was waiting for something. His eyes kept flicking toward me, then back to the others. He wasn't saying anything more, but the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He was still angry. Still frustrated. But I didn't know why. Not yet. I had always considered Mark someone I could rely on, despite our occasional clashes. Growing up, we were never best friends, but we were close. I thought we understood each other. But that night, something changed. I could feel the walls between us growing taller. It wasn't just about what he said, but the way he said it. The way he made sure everyone else could hear it. It felt intentional. Was it a joke? Was it just him venting about something? I didn't think so. There was something deeper to it. Something that had been simmering for a while, and now it was spilling out. I tried to focus on the conversation around me. My mom was talking about how well Sarah's tomatoes were growing, but my mind wasn't on the tomatoes. It was on Mark. Why had he done that? I had been the one to help him out when he lost his job last year. I had been there when he went through that breakup, offering advice, offering my time. But here he was, calling me useless. I could feel the frustration building, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was still trying to figure out what was really going on. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said it. The judgment in his tone. The way he made it feel like I had never been enough. I started wondering if it had something to do with his own life. Maybe he was feeling insecure, maybe something was going wrong in his life, and he was projecting it onto me. I had seen it before in other people. The ones who tear others down to make themselves feel better. Could that be it? I didn't know. But I had to figure it out. For the rest of the night, the conversations continued, but I was no longer fully present. I kept thinking back to that moment, trying to understand. I noticed my dad giving Mark a look, like he was expecting him to say something. But Mark didn't. He just stayed quiet, his focus elsewhere, but his gaze kept darting over to me, like he was waiting for a reaction. And it was in that moment I realized something. He wasn't going to let it go. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to stay. In the past. He was setting the stage for something bigger, something I wasn't fully prepared for. The rest of the evening felt like a blur. The tension was too thick. The constant chatter around me just became background noise. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something had shifted. Something had changed between us, and I couldn't figure out what had caused it. I knew he wasn't going to apologize. I knew that if I confronted him now, it would turn into a full-blown argument, and I wasn't ready for that. But I also knew that I couldn't let this go. I had to understand what he was thinking. Why did he feel the need to belittle me like that? Why did he feel so justified in doing it in front of everyone? There was something I was missing. Something that didn't make sense. As the night wore on, I started picking up on little things. The way he looked at me, the way his body language shifted when he thought no one was watching. There was a kind of silent animosity there, a kind of coldness that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, but it was there. And I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just about me being useless. This was something deeper, something personal. But I wasn't sure what it was yet. And I couldn't let myself react too soon. I had to let it unfold. I had to watch. I had to pay attention. Because if I didn't, I knew I'd regret it. I knew something was coming, and I needed to be ready for it. I had always prided myself on staying calm under pressure, but this was different. Mark's words, his little jab at me, they kept echoing in my mind. I had always felt like I was the one holding the family together. I was the responsible one, the one who everyone could count on. And yet, here he was, trying to tear that down in front of everyone. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. Why now? Why in front of everyone? The night after the dinner, things didn't get any better. I knew Mark was still upset about something, but what? He never fully explained himself, and I wasn't sure I wanted to ask. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on here than just a sibling rivalry. The next day, we were all gathered in the living room for a family get-together. My mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. My dad was leaning against the wall, talking to my cousin, and Sarah was playing with her phone, not really paying attention. But Mark? He wasn't anywhere to be seen. The tension was still there, even though no one else seemed to notice it. I tried to push it aside, focus on the conversation, but something felt wrong. I kept waiting for Mark to show up, but when he did, it wasn't in the way I expected. He walked in, but it wasn't the casual entrance I was used to. His eyes met mine, and there it was again, the same coldness, the same judgment. I could tell something was off, but I didn't want to make a scene, not in front of everyone. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. But as the conversation carried on, I couldn't help but notice how he was acting. He wasn't engaged in the conversation, but he wasn't ignoring it either. He was just observing. Every now and then, I'd catch him glancing at me, his eyes hard, like he was sizing me up. And when I spoke, he'd look at me like I was just some stranger, someone he couldn't care less about. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, though. It was the way he carried himself. There was this air of superiority, like he thought he had it all figured out and everyone else was just beneath him. But it wasn't just me he was acting like this around. I saw it with my dad, too. Mark was taking over conversations, cutting people off, making decisions without asking anyone else. He had this way of pushing people aside without saying a word, just by being the loudest person in the room. It wasn't that he was trying to start a fight, not directly, but he was making sure he was in control of the situation, no matter what. He didn't need to yell or get aggressive. He was using his presence, his attitude, to dominate. And it worked. Everyone else just kind of let him have his way, like they didn't want to rock the boat. But I could see it. I could see what was happening. It was subtle, but it was there. Mark was trying to control everything, trying to make everyone fall in line. I had to admit, it frustrated me. Why was he doing this? Why was he trying to take over everything? I had always supported him. I had always been there for him when he needed help, but it seemed like that wasn't enough anymore. It was like he wanted more. And I wasn't sure what it was. He hadn't come out and said it, but I could feel it. I could feel him slowly, methodically taking control of the room, of the situation, of everything. And I didn't know how to stop it. As the evening went on, I found myself growing more and more frustrated. Mark wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He was putting himself at the center of everything, and everyone else just kind of went along with it. I could see my mom and dad exchanging looks, like they were uncomfortable with what was happening but didn't want to say anything. It was like they were waiting for someone to speak up. But I wasn't sure if I was the right person to do it. Was I overreacting? Was I just being too sensitive? Or was Mark really trying to take control? I didn't know, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt like something wasn't right. It wasn't just a matter of him being bossy or a little annoying. It was like he was trying to strip away everyone's independence, making it clear that he was the one in charge. And I hated it. But I wasn't going to say anything just yet. I had to keep my cool. I had to let things unfold. But the more I watched him, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one he was doing this to. My mom seemed to be getting more and more frustrated, too. I could see it in her face. She was trying to keep the peace, but Mark's constant need to control everything was starting to get to her. And my dad? He was getting quieter, too. The more Mark talked, the more my dad shrank back. It was like Mark had figured out how to manipulate the situation without anyone even realizing it. It was starting to feel like I was watching a game unfold, and I wasn't sure if I was part of it or if I was just a spectator. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let this slide. I didn't know what Mark was after, but I wasn't going to let him get away with whatever this was. I couldn't. Not when it felt like he was slowly taking everything over, one little comment at a time. The tension that had been building between Mark and me reached a boiling point during the family gathering the following weekend. I had been trying to ignore the subtle power plays, the way he seemed to dominate the room with his mere presence. But now, it wasn't just subtle. He was taking over, and I couldn't pretend I didn't notice anymore. I could feel the weight of the moment as soon as I stepped into the room. Everyone was already gathered, but as I walked in, Mark's eyes immediately found mine. I knew this wasn't going to be like the last time. I could tell he had something more to say. Something he had been holding on to, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It started out innocently enough. We were sitting around the dining table, having a casual dinner, with the usual family chatter in the background. But there was an uncomfortable undercurrent, something I couldn't shake off. The way Mark was sitting, leaning forward just a little too much, his hands resting on the table like he was ready to pounce. I noticed my dad was quieter than usual, only half listening to the conversation. My mom seemed distracted too, lost in her thoughts. I could feel the gap growing between us, and I couldn't help but wonder what had changed. Was this the same Mark I grew up with? The one I used to spend hours playing video games with? The one who had been there for me during tough times? Or was this a completely different person? Mark cleared his throat suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts. You know, he started, his voice cool and calculated, it's funny how people can think they're doing something good for everyone, but end up messing it up. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I knew this wasn't going to be good. He was talking to everyone, but I knew exactly who he was addressing. Me. I mean, you try so hard to make things right, but you're just dragging everyone down, Mark continued, his words slow and deliberate. It was like he was testing each one, making sure they hit just right. And they did. My mom glanced up for a moment, her eyes darting between me and Mark, but she quickly looked away. No one said anything. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I didn't know how to respond. Should I defend myself? Should I fight back? Or should I just stay silent? I chose silence. But it was killing me inside. Mark went on, unaware, or maybe fully aware, of the way he was making me feel. I don't know, man, he said, chuckling dryly, sometimes I wonder how you manage to stay so calm all the time. Like you don't even care about anything that's going on. I guess that's your thing, huh? Just keep your head down and pretend everything's fine. I felt my blood start to boil, but I didn't let it show. The way he was twisting the truth, making it sound like I was the one who didn't care, it hit harder than I expected. But still, I said nothing. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. My dad was now staring at his plate, his jaw clenched. I could feel his discomfort, but it didn't matter. Mark wasn't done. It's just frustrating, he continued, his tone now edging into something more accusatory. I've always tried to help you out, but you don't seem to appreciate it. Maybe it's time for you to realize that you're not as important as you think you are. My heart stopped. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I could see the others glancing at each other, but no one spoke up. They were all just waiting for me to say something, but I was frozen. The pain in my chest, the embarrassment, it all swirled together, but I kept my face blank. I had to. If I reacted, it would only make things worse. I couldn't let him have the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But as Mark continued, I felt my control slipping. The more he spoke, the more I realized something, this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just some petty argument or frustration. Mark had been building this up, and now it was clear. He was doing this to break me, to put me in my place. I didn't know why. I didn't know when it all started, but I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't happening. I wanted to lash out. I wanted to yell, to tell him everything I was feeling. But I couldn't. If I did, I would lose. He would win. And I couldn't let that happen. So I sat there, in the silence, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. And the worst part? He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was talking to the others now, like he had said everything he needed to say to me, and now he was moving on. I didn't know how long I sat there, numb, but I knew one thing, I couldn't let this continue. I had to find a way to make this stop, but I had no idea how. I had always been the quiet one, the one who took everything in stride. But now, I was starting to wonder if that was the problem. Was I just letting Mark walk all over me? Was this the moment when everything changed? I didn't know. But I knew I had to do something before it got worse. The silence after Mark's words hung in the air for what felt like hours. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the frustration simmering just below the surface. He had said it all, everything I had been trying to avoid facing. But there was something more beneath it, something I couldn't quite figure out. As I sat there, I couldn't help but replay the night in my mind, trying to piece together the puzzle that Mark had laid out so effortlessly. Why had he decided to go so far this time? It wasn't just about me being useless anymore. It was like he was trying to expose something that had been buried for a long time. And that's when I heard it. My mom was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner, her back turned to me. But then she spoke, casually at first, "You know, I heard Mark was talking about the house today." The way she said it, with no real emphasis, made me freeze. My mind instantly went back to the argument. I thought maybe I had misheard. But the more I processed her words, the more I realized something wasn't adding up. I had never heard Mark speak about the house before, at least not in any significant way. Why now? Why bring it up out of the blue? That was the first hint that something was off, something more was going on under the surface. I wasn't sure how to react, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. I had always been the one to keep quiet, to avoid confrontation. But this time, it wasn't just about me. It was about something deeper, something Mark had been keeping from everyone. I waited until dinner was over and everyone had dispersed into different rooms. I didn't speak a word the whole night, but I couldn't stop thinking about what my mom had said. The house. The property that had been in the family for years. Why was Mark bringing it up now? And why did he seem so focused on it? I couldn't ignore it. Something was definitely going on. Later that evening, I found myself alone in the living room. The TV was off, and the house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I could feel the tension building in the back of my mind. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Mark's words had triggered something in me, something I had been avoiding for years. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through some old family texts, searching for any clue that could explain Mark's sudden attitude. And then it hit me. The text from a few months ago, the one I had dismissed at the time. It was from my dad, saying that Mark had been talking to a lawyer about some family matters. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now it felt like a key piece of the puzzle. A lawyer? Family matters? The house. Was he trying to take control of the property? Was that what this was really about? I felt my stomach drop. The more I thought about it, the more everything started to click into place. Mark's cold behavior, his manipulation, the way he had been subtly taking control of every conversation, it wasn't just about me. He was playing a game, and I was caught in the middle of it. I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. But I also knew that if I confronted him directly, I would be giving him exactly what he wanted, an emotional outburst, a reason to push me even further away. I had to approach this carefully, strategically. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thoughts of what Mark might be planning kept me up. He had always been good at hiding his true intentions. But now, it was clear he was working behind the scenes, manipulating everyone around him to get what he wanted. And I had been blind to it for so long. The next morning, I decided to confront him. Not directly, not yet. But I needed to find out what he was really after. I started by casually bringing up the lawyer situation during breakfast, asking him how things were going with the family matters he had been discussing. He froze for just a second, the flicker of guilt crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a grin. "Oh, you know, just some legal stuff. Nothing major," he said, brushing it off. But I wasn't fooled. There was something in his voice, a hesitation, like he wasn't being honest. And that's when I knew. I had to dig deeper. I needed to know what he was planning before it was too late. Over the next few days, I kept my distance from him, watching from the sidelines, observing how he interacted with everyone. I noticed how he would subtly steer conversations, how he would downplay his role in family decisions, as if he had no real stake in the situation. But then, out of nowhere, he started asking my parents about their plans for the house, their future, as if he was entitled to the answers. It was like he was testing the waters, seeing just how much control he could get without anyone noticing. That's when I realized, I was dealing with someone who wasn't just trying to control the conversation. Mark was trying to control the future of the family. He was setting the stage for something big, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I had to be ready. I couldn't just wait and see what he would do next. I had to make my move before it was too late. The question was, how? As the days passed, the tension between Mark and me only seemed to grow. He had become more brazen in his attempts to manipulate the family dynamics. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking on a tightrope, trying to balance my next move carefully. I had spent enough time observing, watching Mark's every action, trying to understand what he was really after. It was becoming more and more clear, he wasn't just trying to control the conversation. He was setting the stage for something bigger. His power play wasn't just about getting his way in little moments, it was about taking control of the family's future. And the thing was, no one else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they didn't want to admit it. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew it was only a matter of time before he would make his move, and I wasn't sure I was ready to let that happen. The first sign came when Mark casually started talking about the house again. This time, though, it wasn't just in passing. He was asking questions, digging for information, probing deeper. "So, Dad," he said one evening, "what's the plan for the house when you guys decide to downsize?" My dad, who had been sitting back and enjoying his evening, didn't seem to think much of the question. "Oh, we haven't really thought about it. It's not something we're worried about just yet." But Mark wasn't satisfied with that answer. He pressed, "Yeah, but I mean, you've been talking about it for a while now. What are you thinking? Are you planning to sell, or is it going to one of us?" It was like a light bulb went off in my head. Mark wasn't just asking out of curiosity. He was planting the seeds. Testing the waters. Trying to see how much control he could gain over the situation. I watched my dad's face as he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He didn't like the question, not at all. But Mark wasn't done. He kept pushing, nudging my dad into a corner with more subtle questions about the future. It was clear now, Mark wasn't just interested in the house for sentimental reasons. He wanted it. And he was willing to manipulate the entire family to get it. I couldn't believe it. My own brother, turning everything into a power struggle. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not without a fight. Later that night, I found myself alone in the living room, sitting in the quiet that had settled over the house. My mind was racing, my heart still pounding from the conversation earlier. I had to do something. I had to confront Mark, but I needed to be careful. If I was too direct, he would just turn it around and make me look like the bad guy. No, I needed to be strategic. I needed to make him expose his hand. So, I decided to wait. I would bide my time, gather more information, and then make my move when the moment was right. The next few days were filled with subtle shifts in our interactions. Mark was always around, hovering just enough to keep his presence known but never fully engaging. He was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But I was watching him too. Every word, every glance, every small gesture. I was waiting for him to slip up. And then it happened. One evening, we were all sitting around the dinner table, the usual family chatter filling the air. But I noticed something different in Mark's demeanor. He wasn't the dominant one anymore. There was a shift in the room, a subtle change that no one else seemed to notice. Mark was trying to steer the conversation, but this time, I wasn't going to let him. I waited for the right moment, and when he made a casual remark about the house again, I spoke up. "You know, Mark," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm, "it's funny that you keep asking about the house. You've been bringing it up a lot lately. What's really going on here?" The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised by my directness. Mark's face went blank for a moment, but then he quickly recovered, smiling that familiar smile of his. "What do you mean?" "I'm just asking questions, man." But I could see it in his eyes, he knew that I knew. He was caught off guard, but he wasn't about to admit it. "Not yet." I pressed on, "You've been pushing for answers, pushing for control. It's not just about the house, is it? What's really going on, Mark?" There was a brief silence, the kind that feels like the calm before a storm. Mark's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but I could tell it wasn't genuine. It was like he was trying to hide something, trying to cover up the truth. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not anymore. The rest of the night passed in awkward silence. Mark didn't say much after that, and I could tell he was rattled. It wasn't the answer I was looking for, but I knew I was getting closer. I was making him nervous, and that was a step in the right direction. But I knew I couldn't let up. I had to keep pushing, keep watching, and wait for him to slip up again. I wasn't going to let him manipulate the family like this. I wasn't going to let him take control without a fight. The power was shifting, and this time, I was going to be the one in control. The following days were a whirlwind. Every time I saw Mark, it felt like there was a cloud hanging over me. I had confronted him, but he hadn't backed down. In fact, it seemed like he had only become more determined, more calculated in his moves. I had hoped that by calling him out, I'd get the answers I needed, but instead, I was left with more questions. And I knew, deep down, that the confrontation wasn't over yet. If anything, it had just begun. The next week, things in the family started to shift. Mark's behavior became even more aggressive, more pointed. He wasn't trying to hide his intentions anymore. He was playing the game, and he was doing it right in front of everyone. He started dropping little comments here and there, remarks about the house, about the future, about how things were inevitable. He wasn't subtle about it anymore. It was like he was testing the waters, gauging just how much control he could take. One evening, we were all sitting in the living room, a casual family night. My mom was knitting, my dad was flipping through the newspaper, and Sarah was on her phone. It seemed like just another typical evening, but there was a tension in the air that none of us could ignore. Mark leaned back in his chair, casually looking at me. His eyes weren't cold this time. But there was something sharp about his gaze, like he was sizing me up. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about the house lately. It's probably time for a change. Things can't stay the way they are forever." My heart skipped a beat. He was pushing again, testing me. And this time, I could feel that the walls were closing in. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "I mean," he continued slowly, "things have to evolve. The house, it's too big for Mom and Dad now. They won't be able to keep up with the upkeep forever." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And honestly, we all know it's going to have to go to someone eventually." His tone was light, but the implications were anything but. My dad glanced up from his newspaper, sensing the shift in the conversation. "We haven't made any decisions about that," he said, his voice tight. Mark waved him off, as if brushing aside any concern. "Oh, of course, Dad. I'm not saying we need to decide right now. But we should at least start thinking about it." The conversation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of what he was implying. He was laying the groundwork, preparing for the next phase of his plan. And I could feel the anger rising in me. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about control, manipulation, and the way he was trying to take everything from under our noses. The worst part was, he wasn't being subtle about it anymore. He didn't care who noticed. He was pushing his agenda, and it felt like he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. As the conversation continued, I kept my eyes on him. He had this air of confidence, like he already had everything figured out. And for the first time, I realized how dangerous that confidence was. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a carefully calculated move. He was playing us all, and we hadn't even realized it yet. I could feel the pressure mounting inside me. I wanted to yell at him, confront him, demand answers. But I knew that wasn't the right move. I had to stay calm, stay strategic. I couldn't let him win this easily. After everyone left the living room that night, I sat alone, stewing in my thoughts. I had to act. But how? I knew I couldn't just confront him head-on without risking everything. He was too good at manipulating the situation, and he knew exactly how to turn things around on me. I needed something more, something that would give me the leverage I needed to push back without falling into his trap. The next few days were a blur of observation. I watched Mark closely, noting every move, every word he said. He was still pushing, still testing boundaries, but this time, I wasn't going to let him slip by unnoticed. I knew he was planning something big. He was trying to make sure that the house, the future, everything, was within his grasp. But I wasn't going to let him take control so easily. I had been patient, but my patience was running out. I needed to make my move before it was too late. I wasn't going to let Mark get away with this. Not when I knew what he was trying to do. The next time I saw him, I would make sure he understood that this wasn't his game to win. And I would take back the control he thought he had over everything. I wasn't going to let him manipulate the family, or me, any longer. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the truth would finally come to light. I had played my part carefully, biding my time, watching Mark and waiting for the right opportunity to expose his intentions. The tension had been building for weeks, each passing day adding more weight to the situation. But now, everything was about to change. It all started on a Thursday evening, just after dinner. The family had gathered in the living room, chatting casually, when Mark's phone rang. He picked it up, but instead of answering like he usually did, he stepped outside, leaving the door slightly ajar. I could hear his voice, but it was muffled. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The way he was speaking, the way he was trying to keep the conversation private, was enough. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, knowing that whatever he was saying, it was important. I had been suspecting something for a while, and this just confirmed it. He was hiding something. I waited until he came back inside, trying to act casual, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. It was time. The next day, I decided to act. I couldn't just sit back and let him keep playing his game. I had to confront him. Not in front of the family, not in a way he could turn against me, but in a way that would expose him for what he really was. I waited until everyone else was out of the house, leaving just Mark and me. I found him in the kitchen, staring into the fridge, trying to look busy. But I knew he was aware of me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but firm. Mark looked up, surprised, but quickly masked his reaction with a casual smile. "What's up?" he asked, as if nothing had changed. But I could see it in his eyes. He knew this conversation was coming. "I know what you're doing," I said, my tone low but clear. His smile faltered, just for a second, but then it was back. "What are you talking about?" he replied, feigning innocence. "Don't play dumb with me," I said, stepping closer, my voice growing stronger. "I know about the lawyer, the house, everything. I know you've been planning this behind everyone's back. Mark's face shifted, a flicker of something crossing his features. Was it guilt? Was it panic? I couldn't tell. I don't know what you think you know, but you've got it all wrong, he said, his voice suddenly defensive. But I could tell he was losing control. I had him. No, I replied, my voice unwavering, I'm not wrong. I've been watching you. The way you've been pushing, the way you've been trying to take control of everything. It's obvious now. This isn't about the house, Mark. It's about power. And I'm not going to let you take it. His expression twisted for a moment, like he was trying to find the words to argue, but nothing came out. You don't understand, he finally said, his voice quieter now. I'm doing what needs to be done. Someone has to take control. You don't get it. You've always been content sitting in the background, letting everyone else take the lead. But I'm not like that. I won't let this family fall apart. There it was. The truth. He wasn't doing this for the good of the family. He wasn't doing this to help anyone. He was doing it for himself. He was trying to manipulate everything, trying to put himself in a position of power, and he didn't care who he stepped on to get there. I could feel the anger rising, but I kept it in check. I couldn't let him see how much his words hurt. You've been manipulating everyone, Mark, I said, my voice cold now. And you've been doing it for so long, you think no one notices. But I see it. I see everything you're doing. And it stops now. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was bitter, mocking. You think you can stop me? You think you can just expose me and everything will magically go back to normal? You've always been too soft. That's why you've never been able to stand up to anyone. That's why no one listens to you. His words stung, but they also fueled my fire. I don't need anyone to listen to me, I said, stepping back. But I'm not going to let you tear this family apart. Not for your own gain. Mark's face twisted in frustration. For a moment, I thought he was going to lash out, but instead, he just stood there, seething. You've got no idea what you're doing, he spat. You're going to regret this. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to let him scare me into submission. Maybe I will, I said, but at least I'll know I did the right thing. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there, seething with anger. But I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. Mark had finally shown his true colors, and now everyone would know. He could no longer hide behind the mask of concern for the family. He was in it for himself, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The power had shifted. And now it was my turn to take control. The aftermath hit harder than I expected. The confrontation with Mark had shattered the fragile illusion of harmony that had hung over our family. I could feel the weight of what had just happened, not just for me, but for everyone. My brother's true intentions were finally exposed, but the fallout wasn't as simple as just telling the truth. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt the gravity of the change I had set in motion. Mark's face had been filled with disbelief, frustration, and something darker, resentment. He didn't like being exposed, and I knew that would be the first of many consequences. But what I didn't expect was how quickly everything began to unravel. The next day, things were tense. At first, it wasn't obvious. We went about our daily routines, but there was a thick undercurrent in the house. My mom, usually the peacemaker, was quieter than usual. My dad kept to his newspaper, his gaze occasionally flicking up toward me, but never fully meeting my eyes. Sarah, my cousin, stayed in her room. It was like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mark, of course, was the first to break the silence. I hadn't heard from him since the night of our confrontation, and I knew he was simmering in frustration. But he didn't come to me directly. Instead, he went to my dad. "We need to talk," I overheard him say as I passed the hallway. I stopped for a moment, listening. I don't know what's going on with my name, but he's completely out of line. He doesn't understand what's at stake here. I could hear the anger in his voice, but also something else, fear. He was cornered, and he knew it. I stayed hidden, trying to piece together what he was planning. He wasn't going to just let this go. I could feel it in my bones. But what struck me was how my dad didn't immediately respond. He was quiet, listening to Mark, but not speaking. After a few moments, Mark's voice softened, and for a brief second, I thought he might be trying to apologize. But no. I just don't get it, Mark continued. Why does he think he can just come in and throw everything off balance? This house, this family, it's all been built on trust, and now he's making everything complicated. If things go south, it's on him. My stomach churned. I had never seen Mark so manipulative, so willing to twist the truth to make himself look like the victim. But what hurt more was how easily my dad seemed to buy into it. For a moment, I felt like I was losing everything. My brother was tearing us apart, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to stop him. But then I remembered the truth. The truth was on my side. And it was time to make sure it didn't get buried. That evening, as I sat in the living room, the weight of everything started to sink in. I had exposed Mark's lies, but the truth wasn't always enough to set things right. There was more to this than just proving he was manipulating the family for his own gain. Now I had to deal with the fallout, the damage that had been done, not just to my relationship with Mark, but to the trust that had once held our family together. I had already done the hard part, but now the consequences would hit harder than I could have imagined. The phone call from my mom came a few hours later. Her voice was strained, as if she had been holding back tears. "We need to talk," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an invitation to face the aftermath. I took a deep breath and made my way over to the kitchen where she was sitting, her hands resting on the table. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something, some sign that everything would be okay. "I know what happened between you and Mark," she finally said, her voice shaky. "And I want you to understand, it's not that we didn't see it, or that we didn't know something was wrong. It's complicated." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to expose him, but I couldn't let him keep controlling everything. I couldn't let him manipulate the family for his own gain. My mom nodded slowly, as if she understood. "I know. I don't want this to tear us apart. You're still my son, and I love you. But Mark is your brother. And he's lost, too. He doesn't know how to fix this. He's been caught up in his own struggles, and now he feels like he's losing everything." I felt a sharp pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Maybe I had pushed Mark too far. But no, I reminded myself. He wasn't innocent. And neither was I. The next few weeks were a blur of awkward family dinners, strained conversations, and unanswered questions. Mark wasn't talking to me, and I wasn't reaching out either. But every now and then, I would catch him looking at me from across the room, his expression unreadable. It was like the silence between us had become a wall that neither of us knew how to break. I wasn't sure if there was a way to fix this. I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. But what I did know was that I had to keep my ground. I had exposed the truth, and no matter how hard Mark tried to twist it, he couldn't take that away from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life again. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a resolution that tied everything up in a neat little bow. But it was real. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for.